All right, so quick recap from last video. We got our big and beefy staircase in, along with all of our joists and blocking. But as you can tell, I'm sitting on a joist and it's very uncomfortable, which means we're working on our flooring next, so we're gonna be installing some 3/4 inch cabinet grade plywood. Now let's get started. I'm installing the flooring in a brick lay pattern, mounting each sheet with 3 2.5 inch number 10 structural screws into each joist. All right, we've got the flooring in on the loft and it's looking really good. I've got my furnace up here now, which is gonna get installed in that far corner over there over the next couple weeks here. And luckily it's been a pretty mild Minnesota winter, but I'm really looking forward to having some permanent heat in here. But as you can tell, we still need railings, which brings us to today's video sponsor, Muzata, who sent us out some really beautiful black steel cable railings. Now, I have a ton of boxes to go open up. It's like Christmas morning, so let's go do that. All right, I've finally got everything unpackaged and laid out. I got almost everything up on the table because I just kind of want to walk through all this. But first off, boy does Muzata know how to package their products. It took me a while just to get all this unpacked, and you know what? I am okay with spending time unpacking something because I'd much rather be spending my time doing that than being on call with product support. Now, let's kind of walk through what we got here. So first off, we have all of the posts for the entire railing system. We have our top railings. We've got our black steel cable, a bunch of hardware that are going to be going with our posts. They even give you the lag screws to mount these into the floor. I just want to take time to look at these posts because these guys have some heft to them. They are a thick gauge steel. I am really impressed with just the robustness. Overall, I am super pleased with what I'm seeing. Everything is in really great shape. Now let's take this all up onto the loft. I'm gonna lay it out and we're gonna talk about this system. Now, for those of you who don't know about railing systems and designing it, it can be pretty complex and difficult. There's a lot of math going on and it's very easy to make mistakes. However, what's really great about Muzata is they make it super easy. All I had to do was give them my dimensions. So I gave them my 13 feet across the front, 7 feet on the sides, same thing for over there, and then the rise and run for my steps. After that, they do all the engineering work. It takes about a day or two for them to give me a bill of materials. You order it and I get everything shipped out. Got here about a week and a half. Now it's time to get these things installed. So let's keep going. I'm starting off the install with marking the post locations while using my laser level for perfect alignment. You could use a chalk line, but the laser level is way faster and it ensures I have a perfect right angle. I'm marking the location for the corner post and the last post of each section first. Then I can find the dimension for the equal spacing between the intermediary posts and mark their locations as well. With my post locations found, I can now use the posts to trace hole locations and start pre-drilling for the lag screws. I positioned my posts so that most of the lag screws would be going into either a joist or a header. However, occasionally I would have an open hole where I had to add some 2x6 blocking in order to give the screw something to bite into. After installing the blocking, I went back and re-drilled those previously open holes. With the holes drilled, I installed the stainless steel lag screws and washers provided by Muzata, making sure to finish torquing by hand in order to not strip out the holes. You want to make sure that all your posts are plumb, or else it's really going to come back and haunt you when you're installing the cables. With all the posts installed on the platform, it's time to move on to the stairs. I made 2 spacers to position each post accurately on each step. It's good practice to lay out your posts first and check and make sure that the edge of the steps does not interfere with the bottom cable. I used a metal rod to simulate the cable, but string would work just as well. I had to get some 2-inch long lag screws for the stairs since the steps weren't thick enough for the provided screws. So Muzata does provide these base plates for the posts that just go on and they cover up all those bolts down there. However, my whole dream for this loft is industrial, big and beefy, exposed bolts. So I'm not going to be using these plates, and I have instead painted all of my bolts black because it just gives that industrial look, but it does give it a very good finished look. All right, we've got all the posts in. They're looking really good. I'm starting to get a good feel for what the railings are going to be like up here when they're finished, and I'm getting really excited. Now we've got all the posts in on top here, and we've got all of our stair posts in. So now it's time to get working on our railings. But before we can attach our railings, we need to attach these little standoffs to every single post on here. So these angle, so for the steps they can be angled and then they can be flat while they're up here. The only thing that doesn't get these are the corner posts. They get a 90-degree bracket instead. Now, as for our railings, these come in 6.5-foot sections. So you do have to trim these every once in a while. Now, the front section that I have going on right here is 13 feet, so I'm gonna have to trim very little. But a big thing to note is that your seams for where these railings meet, they need to be right on top of a post. That way they're supported by the post. You can't have them just hanging out over here. They need to be on top of the post. So let's keep going. Now, real quick, I just wanted to say thanks again to Muzata for sending out this cable railing system. It is looking so good. These parts are very high quality, and I'm really looking forward to having this thing in the shop. But on top of that, they also gave me a discount code for you guys, which is ZACH6. That will save you 6% at checkout with no minimum requirements. Plus, they currently have a spring promotion going on right now. So if you are in the market for a cable railing system, now's the time to take a look. So if you are interested, I'll have a link down below in the description to check it out. Thanks again, Muzata. Now, let's get back to the build. With the standoffs installed, it's time to start working on the railings. I started off with the corners and cutting a miter joint to conjoin the 2 sections. Now, it's a good idea to test your saw angle by cutting 2x4s first and checking for a perfect 90-degree angle before cutting into the railing. You will need a metal chop saw for these because these railings are made of very high quality stainless steel. Muzata provides blocks of high density polymer that really help in the alignment of these railing joints. Once I had the corner joint ready for install, I taped both the joint and the 2 railing sections in place. Then I went underneath to mark the hole locations at the corner and posts. I'm tracing these holes using a welder's pencil. I also marked on the railing where it needed to be cut for the joint to fall on the halfway point of the standoff. With all the holes traced, I brought both the railings down to my drill press to drill out some clearance holes, which allows the screws to go in unobstructed. So, before I got these railings installed, I was doing a little testing just to kind of refine my process. And how this is originally designed is Muzata sends out these coarse thread screws and these machine screws that they're just supposed to go through those standoffs on the posts and into the holes that you've drilled into these railings and lock everything in place. However, I was having a little trouble because these stainless steel railings are really good quality and they're very hard, but I was having a lot of trouble with tapping these, and all I was really doing was mangling the threads on my screws. So I'm going to be borrowing Muzata's design for the seaming of the two different rail sections. So they provide these little black blocks and they bridge the gap between one seam to another because the screws go into these blocks. Now, I've cut my own blocks out of some 2x4 and these are just going to slide in to my railings, and then I'm cutting clearance holes on my railing, and then I'm just going to use these coarse thread screws that are going to go through my standoffs on the posts and then up into these blocks and lock everything in place. With the railing holes drilled out, I taped the two railing sections back in place, then pre-drilled the corner block before driving in the coarse thread screws. I used my long metal rod from before to push my wood block into position above the post before I pre-drill for the screws. After attaching the first section of railing, I realized that it was a really awkward angle to try and drive the screws in while the railings were in place. So from here on, I found it was much easier just to remove the top of the standoff, then attach it to the railing while it was on my assembly table, and then reattach the standoffs back to the posts. I used pretty much the same method for the stair railings, except I attached two sections of railing together with a stand-up before putting them in place to trace the hole locations. And then reattach the standoffs back to the posts. All right, we've got the posts and the railings in. The loft is looking super good. Now it took us a little bit just to figure out the process of installation, but now these things are on. They are rock solid, and this thing is looking pretty doggone great. Now, we only have one more step, and that is installing our cables. So I have 72 lengths of cables to cut and install, so let's keep going. All right, so every cable system is different, so I went ahead and installed this whole section of cables, and now that I've got the process figured out, let's go run through it over here. So there are a couple different parts for these cable systems. First is obviously the cable, but then we have our end terminals that crimp on and go into these holes and hold that cable in place. Then we have our crimp-on tensioners that allow you to crank on them and tension the cable. And then there's adhesive washers that cover these holes and give it a little bit more of a high-end look. Now, the first thing we got to do is we got to figure out what length we need to cut our cable to. So, to measure for the length of our cable, what we need to do is identify where our terminal and our tensioners are going to sit. So in this case, our terminals are going to sit right here, and then our tensioners are going to sit on the outside of this post. So what we're going to do is measure from that surface to this surface. I recommend bringing up a friend because you want to make sure this measurement is accurate as possible. So in this case, it's 75 1/16 of an inch. You can let go. Thank you. So with 75 1/16 inches, that is still a little too long because our tensioners do have some length to them. So what we need to do is we need to take that 75 1/16 inch, subtract 5/16 of an inch, which gives us 74 3/4 inches, and that's how long we need to cut our cable. Now that we know our length, we can cut our first cable, which is a lot easier with an extra set of hands. After this, I crimped on the terminal, making sure to run the cable through the U-shaped side first and flush the end of the cable with the opposite end of the terminal. I'm using an 1/8 inch die on my hydraulic crimper and giving it everything I had because you really don't want these things to come loose. These terminals create a T-shaped anchor when installed. After completing the first cable section, I highly recommend doing a test fit just to make sure everything fits before making the rest of your cables. From here, installing the cables is pretty straightforward, but there are two major things to note. First, 2 adhesive washers need to be threaded onto the cable between each post, and second, the washers do not fit over the tensioner, so they need to be threaded on before crimping on the tensioner. Once all the cables are installed, you can tension them using the provided tools, starting from the center cables and working your way out. With everything tensioned, it's time to peel the backing off of each of those washers and put them in place. Pro tip, don't cut the zip ties off of the cable rolls or else this will be you. From here, rinse and repeat until you get to the stairs. The only thing different about the stairs is there are tensioners on both ends of the cable, along with 30-degree washers that fit around each tensioner. To cut the correct cable length, you'll need to measure the distance from the two surfaces that the tensioners sit on, then subtract 2 inches. As always, test fit before you commit. And with that, this loft is done.
Oh!
I think that should stay. That actually is funny.
All right, the shop loft is done. And now before I say anything about it, I want to say again, huge thanks to Muzata for sending out these railings. This loft looks amazing with its big and beefy timbers, along with the black railings. It couldn't have turned out any better. It's amazing. This is the biggest build I've done on the channel so far, and it turned out so well. Now, as you can tell, we've got a lot of open space now. So I've got a couple ideas for what I want to do. I'm thinking like an office space up here, but beyond that, I want this shop to be able to build anything. I want to do anything I can in here. So one of the big things I'm considering is 3D printing. So I want to put a 3D printing space up over here by the furnace. I'm thinking of Bamboo Labs for a 3D printer, but if you guys have any recommendations, feel free to throw it down in the comments. I'd love to hear what you guys think, if any of you are into 3D printing. There is one thing coming that is going to be super cool, and it's going to be going right there. But I'm not going to tell you about that yet, so you're going to have to subscribe so you can stay up to date on all my future projects. If you enjoyed this video at all, I hope you press the like button. It helps me out a ton, and I really do appreciate it. And leave a comment. Let me know what you think of the whole build, if you have any recommendations for stuff you want to see in the shop, because there's a lot more coming. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.